In episode 8, I'm joined by Rob Panariello, physical therapist and successful business owner. And this was a real easy one for me. I've known Rob for almost 20 years now. And I really wanted to dive into what he has done to develop himself as a professional and what kind of connections he made, who he listened to, what kind of effort he put in. Because I've always known Rob to be a real hard worker and just a good person all around in terms of making those connections and learning from the best. So I'm really hoping you'll enjoy this talk with Rob Panariello because he has some great wisdom to offer on education, career development, and life in general. All right, Rob Panariello, thanks for jumping on. I wanted to specifically talk to you about a lot of areas around education for people. I'm getting a lot of questions like, "Hey, I want to get into sports. I want to work with athletes, and I've been looking at the strength and conditioning thing, and I'm sort of like, right." And then I talk to you about it, and we talk about some of the inherent, I guess, I don't know what the word is, but there's some inconsistencies around certification and accreditation in strength and conditioning. And then I ask you, well, what's it like in physical therapy, and why did you choose that route? And so it gets us into this deep dive around your experience and your educational experiences, your choices, and then all the other stuff that you did to support your education throughout your career. So that's what I want to talk about, is just kind of get started with, you know, you're this physical therapist, pretty widely known. You're also known in sports performance. And how did that come to be? Like, where did that all start? So I'll let you start.
First of all, thanks for having me. I think I would say where it all started was, we all pay our dues, right? I went to school and became an athletic trainer, and my head athletic trainer was also a physical therapist. So he was a big mentor to me. His name was Kent Scriber, and I went to Ithaca College, small school upstate New York, and went back to school for my PT degree. And then, had always either participated in athletics or whatever it may be, and got into strength and conditioning as well. And, just my interest has always been adapting principles of strength and conditioning into the rehab setting. And when someone left rehab, having that background, hopefully knowing the modifications they needed to make so not to exacerbate their condition that they went through in rehab. And probably a big highlight of my career was when I worked at the hospital for special surgery, and wound up doing a lot of research there. And I really, at that institution, I really found the value of academics and academia. And just that's how I think I started. I was hired as the head strength and conditioning coach at St. John's University while at special surgery. So it was a very unique situation, right? I would work 6 in the morning till about 2 in the afternoon, 1:32 in the afternoon, jump on my car, get to St. John's by 2:33 and work till 8, 9 at night. And, and just practice both trades, bringing both back and forth. And I think, publishing on it, or if you speak at a conference, kind of the snowball going downhill. Hey, this is an interesting thing, or what people perceive to be interesting. And, you get a little bit of traction and people want to know what you're doing. But it was the exposure, whether in print, in medical journals, or, lecturing at scientific, at conferences, whether strength and conditioning conferences, rehab conferences, metal, whatever it may be. So that's kind of really the Reader's Digest version of how kind of it started.
And I would assume there's some key people that really influenced you. And if we talk about the hospital for special surgery, I'm sure there's some professionals, some
Sure.
doctors there that.
Yeah. I mean, Dr. Russell Warren, the core people that was there before they really exploded and grew. Russ Warren, Tom Wikowitz, Answorth Allen, Steve O'Brien, David Olchek, Scott Rodeo. I mean, so many, you had the value. What was really valuable to me there is, every week going on like grand rounds, which you attended with me, right? The core conference, and to go on grand rounds, and then have the ability to put it all together. So you could spend time in a biomechanics lab if you had a special interest on a certain topic, and then you could go to the soft tissue and biology lab, right? And then, I'd be in rehab, but I could walk into the ORs and watch the procedures, and then see patients with the physicians. And so then go to the medical library, right? And look everything up and have any resource I wanted available to me. So all it really cost me was hard work and time, right? Like they say, sweat equity, so to speak, which is a small price to pay in my mind. And you had the availability of so many resources, great minds that either evolve the questions you had, or provide you the answers with some of the questions you had. And so, just going through that spirit experience year after year, plus the hands-on experience, whether it's training athletes or rehabbing athletes or whatever, testing athletes, and patients. Um, it was a valued experience that I would never take lightly and always treasure. So that was really, being in that environment, it really honed home the importance of education and to continue your education. You know.
Yeah, because a lot of people might say like, "Oh, I want to jump into private practice and just kind of work my way through." But in your case, working for that organization really created a lot of opportunities and a lot of learning opportunities to be around those people.
As well as how to learn, right? As well as the experience of how to learn, and how to not only perform research but look at research and see, at least in your mind or with your peers, what's valid, what's fluff, and anything in between. Um, yeah, no, like I said, it was a great experience. Um,
You were saying, I remember you telling me that Dr. Warren was involved with some pro teams that you had a chance to kind
yeah,
of
sure, Dr.
piggyback on.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the open mindedness of that. So we wanted to start using. I mean, I want to start using the squat exercise as part of our ACL rehab back in 85, 80, 45, 86 in that area. And the reason being, and a lot has changed since then. The reason being, we used to cast our ACLs, so they'd come out real stiff, and so we would literally be almost manipulating the joint progressively over time to maintain, establish increases, ranges, and motion, right? Because they would be casted at 30 degrees of knee flexion. And the patellofemoral joint would get really irritated over time. And isokinetics were really big back then. And so, you have people working on isokinetics. And so between our manual beating up of this patellofemoral joint by bending the knee, and then a lot of stress put on the joint doing knee extensions, I wanted to try something different. People were getting sore. So I went into Dr. Warren and I said, he's a team physician for the New York Giants at the time. And I said to him, I'd like to start squatting our ACLs. And back then, you have to think of Carl Klein and all the taboo with squatting and coaching and the medical profession. And he said, well, tell me why. And we went through it. And he said, okay, you could try it, but I don't want 400 pounds on anybody's back, et cetera. And I said, of course, that wouldn't happen. At least initially, you wouldn't start that way. And then he looked at me, he said, we just hired a new strength coach for the New York Giants by the name of Johnny Parker, who's big on squatting. Why don't you go spend a day with him and talk about it and see what ideas he can give you? And so again, I go back to resources, right? Being in an environment where there's various resources. I spent a day with Johnny. For whatever reason, we hit it off, and he invited me back to stay with him. And I used to work the off season with Johnny and his players for 6, 7 years, and again, learning from him, learning from the players, what they did at their particular colleges, etc. Trying to bring things back in the rehab setting, bringing the things from rehab back into that weight room for guys that had various post-op conditions, and then staying in touch with Dr. Warren, right? Saying, hey, this guy's doing great, or whatever it may be. Ronnie Barnes was the head trainer in the New York Giants. I mean, he was great. He He didn't make a fuss that I was there, so he welcomed me, and I'd always be appreciative of that. Our good friend Steve Kennelly, he's there. Steve's still there. So I can't speak enough about Giant Organization, and like I said, my experiences at Special Surgery, as well as my experiences at St. John's. So I've been very fortunate. I have been.
Yeah, and that time and that commitment on your part, I know you're kind of understating it, but I think a lot of younger people think, "Oh, I want to get that job with the pro team or the college right away." But taking that time and putting in that effort to really seek out people and I think you were probably doing what it's like to drive in New York City, but you're probably like driving all around and spending
Yep.
all this time and effort and you didn't really even think twice about it.
No, I enjoyed it, and right or wrong, here's how I looked at it. I never thought about. I mean, you think about finances, because if you don't have them, what are you going to do, right? But I never thought about finances. I always thought, and the analogy I always make when I speak to younger professionals, regardless of the field they're in, especially if they just got out of school, is that, you know, now's the time where you have the freedom to learn, right? You don't have the commitment of a mortgage, you don't have the commitment of a family, and the expenses and the financial commitments that go with those things, right? And so I'm not saying you shouldn't go on vacation, but you don't have to travel around the world. This is how I looked at it, whether I'm right or wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a car, but you don't have to drive a Bentley, right? At that time. And so if you think about it later on in life, as time goes on, God forbid you need quadruple bypass, right? Well, you're not going to just stick your finger in the phone book. You're going to go to the best cardiac surgeon, right? If you're on trial for murder, you're going to have the best lawyer, right? And if you're going to build a home, you want the best construction individual, right? So if you want the best, you're going to have to pay for it. And so I just always felt, if you really worked hard and you really became really good at what your profession was, which you're going to have to be. Like you said before, someone may graduate and say, "I'll just hang a shingle," and it's not like Field of Dreams. They're not going to come. You've got to get on insurance companies, and the physicians who refer you the patients have to have confidence that you're going to get their patients better. The head coach is going to have confidence you're going to enhance the performance of their athletes, whatever the profession is. And so it's a factor of being able to do it, and establishing the relationships going through that process, so that you have the connections to get the jobs that you want. So the running around and all that stuff, you know, I did it because I really loved it. I did it because I wanted to integrate two professions. I really did. And I wanted to be as good as I could be, whether I'm good, terrible, or anything between. I was just going to try to be the best I could be. And it all worked out. But everything has a price, right? Everything has a price. Nothing's just given to you. So
Yeah, and you talk about all that work you did within that local geographic area that you were in, and obviously a lot of driving distance, but you've also touched on, you would go out to conferences and different educational events, and you would meet people, and even some of those relationships spawned into something bigger.
sure, you meet people, and then they'll ask you, "Can I spend time with you?" Or you can ask if I. I mean, there's nothing like spending time. We've done it, right? You've come to New York, and I visited you in Vancouver, and so when you get that one-on-one, think of a classroom. Would you rather the teacher and 20 kids, or the teacher one-on-one, where you're going to be able to really dig into the nitty-gritty and get the most out of the time you're with someone? It's not. And I'm not saying it's a waste of time. I would encourage people to go to conferences, but you're going to get a lot more out of that professor or that lecturer one-on-one than you are going to be sitting in a classroom of 100, right? So you make relationships, and like I said, it snowballs. Whether these relationships assist you in the position that you want, whether these relationships contribute to your knowledge, whether these relationships whatever it may be, could just become great friendships for decades. They're all very valuable in one way or another.
Yeah, because we pretty much met through Coach Al Vermeil,
Mhm.
and then you met Al through other people, and if you could go kind of through that sequence of how you've.
So Yeah, it's a small world, as they say. The older you get, you realize how small the world is. So with Johnny, now I'm in Giant Stadium with Johnny, and Johnny's really good friends with Al Miller, and Al Miller's good friends with Al Vermeil, and Al Vermeil's really close with Don Chu, and Al Vermeil's also close with Charlie Francis. And then, through Charlie, I hear your name, and it's just a fact. This is what I'm speaking about with relationships. And so, you know, by having Dr. Warren send me the Giant Stadium, I probably have five well-renowned people who are considered experts in their field, yourself included, for in friendships and related professional, and more importantly, friendships for decades that have been invaluable resources for me, as well as good friends. So, you know,
Yeah. And for young people, they're probably asking right now, like, okay, well, how do I make those connections? How do I get to access somebody like Al Vermeil? Or and what would be your advice to somebody who's starting out
yeah,
who
I think
looking for a mentor?
yeah, well, I think I think you get your mentor when you're in school, right? Just like my mentor, Kent Scriber, at the time, was a key factor for me going on to physical therapy school. I am not trying to be, you know, um, insulting to anybody, with any profession. But if my head trainer was not a PT, I wouldn't have been a PT, or or maybe not have been a PT. Maybe later on, but I wouldn't have gone the route I went because my head trainer was a physical therapist as well, and because he's my mentor and he advised that, pushed me towards that, knowing what was best for me as my mentor. I followed his advice. And so I think it starts at school. You may have some outstanding professors that are very well renowned that can assist you, whether it's a job position or advanced degrees or guidance in how to go with a career. And then when you get out, I would say, experience as many things as you can. If you want to be a strength and conditioning coach, well, then look at the gamut. Where is your opportunity where, you're going to learn the most, as well as be influenced by someone who perhaps has relationships to help you later on. I know there's a big thing. Should you do an internship for nothing? I don't know if you have to work 40 hours a week for nothing. Maybe you spend one day a week with somebody. If you're a physical therapist and you have a job, right? Because you're hired, and maybe there's an outstanding physical therapist in your community that you can volunteer a few hours a week, and they can take you under their wing, or an orthopedic surgeon that would have you see patients, and so on and so on. So I would just, you'll find that once you get started, opportunities, this, opportunities will just arise. Like I say, in life, some choices you make and some are made for you, and you'll be surprised at the choices that come before you. It takes effort. It takes effort. It's not going to be handed to you.
Yeah, and you were one at least for me, is famous for not just hammering the same area. Like you got into sports performance for some of the reasons you mentioned, but then you said, okay, here's some opportunities where I can work as a coach, and I understood how that would feed back into my physical therapy profession. Could you talk a bit about how you made those transitions and had those opportunities to coach athletes and how that influenced you?
Yeah, I mean, again, so I'll go back to relationships. So I went to I've been to a number of NSCA conferences, as a presenter and early on as an attendee, and listened to Don Chu speak. And I approached Don after his lecture, and I said, I want to do what you do. I want to train athletes, and I want to be a physical therapist. I want to practice. So he said, "Can you meet me later?" I said, "Sure." So it just goes to show, not knowing me worth whatever, we spent 2 hours speaking, and he offered me a job. And I just started at special surgery. I've only been there about 6 months. And I said, give me a week to think about it. Now, as you know, the conference is in July. And so I thought about it for a week, and I said, I'm happy here with all the resources I have here. Maybe one day I'll change my mind, but I'd like to stay in touch with you. And Don said, well, he's been hired by St. John's University, Coach Carnesecca, Lou Carnesecca at the time, to work with the basketball team for a week in the preseason in September. Would I like to join him? So instead of taking a week's vacation to the islands, right, I took a week's vacation. I sacrificed a week's vacation to work with Don Chu. And met Coach Carnesecca, and he asked for my card. I gave him my card. And I don't know how well they did. That might have been the year they went to the Final Four. It was the year after, but they didn't. They were just close. So I guess coach was just looking for an edge. I'm not sure what. So in April or March or April, after March Madness is all over, I get a call from Coach Conaseca. No interview, no nothing, because he had known me from my time, and he asked me if I'd be his head strength coach, and of course I said yes, and was at St. John's as their head strength coach for 10 years. And So if I didn't approach Don Chu at the convention, if I didn't give up a week's vacation to spend with him instead of going on saying, forget it, I'm not giving up vacation to spend a week with this guy, right? And so the three things that came out of that was in my opinion, Don is the guy when it comes to plyos and et cetera, right? Is brilliant man, taught me a lot about rehab as well. So I got the experiences of the knowledge of him for decades. I know Don over 30 years from that experience. I got the job at St. John's University as the head strength and conditioning coach. And I got a great friend, for a long time. And it's someone that, whatever situations arise, whether professional or personal, he's there for you. So all you had to do is make the effort. So I go back to that. You just got to make the effort. You're not going to get something for nothing. Nothing's going to be handed to you.
Yeah, which sounds, simple saying it, but obviously you did put in the effort and the time. And I was, when you said you're like the head strength coach for St. John's, I'm like, okay, well, how did you manage your time with that, and then also still being a physical therapist and pursuing all these educational goals as well? Like, how did you make it work?
I work 7 days a week, and then, something's got to give, right? But if you figure out what's important, what you can let slide, and so it's rehab, it's strength and conditioning, it's keeping CEUs in two professions, right, to keep your certifications or your licenses, whatever. It's trying to get better in two professions, but the beauty of it is, you're working through all that, but you're integrating two professions, and you're doing something that, at least I feel, back at that period of time in the 80s, and not many people were doing, unless, I'm not aware of many people doing. And it was very enjoyable to me. And then the other thing was to be able to educate and speak to the doctors I worked with about things at special surgery. So hopefully they had a greater appreciation about the strength and conditioning field, and strength and conditioning coaches I worked with, so that maybe they had a greater appreciation for the rehab process, and maybe, athletic training, physical therapy, and to try to be a conduit for that. So, just, it was very enjoyable to me. It was exhausting at times, and because then you're doing research, you're trying to write research papers, you're preparing to, I mean, if you look up Google Blivett, Blivett's putting 5 pounds of crap, 10 pounds of crap in a 5 pound bag. Some days it feels like that, right? You're trying to put 10 pounds of stuff in a 5 pound bag, but I wouldn't change a thing. But you're gonna have to work hard.
And we've talked about this, choices that people have to make around their profession. And in your case, you've done both, but certainly, you've really pursued the physical therapy as your main profession, and built a business and I'll say an empire around it. Um, if you're talking to young people now, like what kind of advice would you give them about career choices if they like coaching, and they want to have a stable income, and they want to move up in their profession? I mean, are you persuading people like, hey, this physical therapy route is probably something that might be best for you, and you could still do some of that other stuff?
Yeah, I would, and I'll tell you why. So from my perspective, you heard the beginning of my career. So then I went to private practice, and we've grown our business tremendously. And then as you get this exposure, right? So then I became, from the various circumstances, I became a CEO, right? And then, as you become a director, and then you get into this position of CEO, you start sitting on boards. You start getting a seat at the table to make decisions. Okay. And that's just the way my career evolved. I could have been a strength and conditioning coach for 40 years and retired as a strength and conditioning coach, and been very happy, right? If that's the route I decided to choose. And if someone chooses that route, there's nothing wrong with that. The times have changed for strength and conditioning now versus when I was there, or when Coach Parker was there, or Miller or Al Vermeil, as you know. And so I would just say, have as much backup as you can, and look for the evolvement of a career. So, I don't know if someone's going to want to be in their 50s and still putting weights on a bar. There's nothing wrong with it, but if you don't want to do that anymore, what are your options? Okay, so I would advise, the way things are going now, is to have a dual role, whether you're an athletic trainer and a strength coach, or a physical therapist and a strength coach. I tend more towards a physical therapy, and I'm also an athletic trainer as well. I'm not trying to dissuade the athletic training profession. It's just, I think you have, at least in New York, where I am, there's more options with physical therapy. You go into your own business, you can work as a physical therapist, you can work as an athletic trainer. If you're a physical therapist and an athletic trainer, at least on paper, you may have an advantage when they go through the interview process of selecting someone. Hey, this person's a physical therapist and an athletic trainer versus just an athletic trainer. If you're an athletic trainer and a strength coach, or a physical therapist and a strength coach, that's going to put you, at least on paper, I think, above your peers when it comes to the interview process of getting the job that you want. And then if you have, as you evolve in these situations, if you really want to make it, a change in the profession, or at least enhance the profession, whatever, with this different background, as you evolve in your profession, right? If you become from the strength coach to the AD, and maybe an AD to, a provost, I don't know, whatever, at the college university, you have a seat at the table. You have a say. And when you have a seat at the table, it's not about program design. It's about, the ideas and the strategies of the institution, the business, whatever it is. And you can make a real difference, but you can't make that big difference unless you have a seat at the table, which some people may desire, some people may not. But my point is this, is that you don't know at age 22, 23, 25, probably what you're going to want at 55, right? When you're still working, not quite retired, probably, or when you're 45, like, how do you want this to evolve? And so I would say, give yourself as many options so that you have more opportunities through your years of experience. And so, like I said, don't just be a strength coach. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you can piggyback that with something else, it may put you, as a head of a selection of your peers when it comes to the job offer. And it may put you in positions later on in life where you're going to have a seat at the table, which I never thought I would be, but it worked out that way. And at the seat at the table, you can make a real difference.
Yeah, and I think, that's very, very, sort of strong advice right now, especially with what we're going,
Yeah.
through, and this idea that a lot of people are just living day to day and in the moment and not thinking, well, "Hey, I'm working with all these great athletes at St. John's University, and this is awesome, and the games are awesome," and then but what does that look like in 20 years? Are people planning for that, or are they just kinda just, I'm just happy now, and this is probably how it's always gonna be."
There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
Not every. How do I say this? And again, I don't mean to be insulting. There's only one chief, right? There's one AD. There's one president. There's plenty of Indians, and there's nothing wrong with being the Indian, or being the worker bee and not being the queen bee, or whatever it may be, But there's nothing wrong with that. Just be happy with what you want to do. My advice is to just, with these other things that piggyback to strength and conditioning, may just give you additional security as well as opportunity. That's all I'm saying. So I would look into it if I was a young strength coach, because again, you may say, God, I got to go through more schooling, and what's it going to cost me? But when you're 35 with 3 kids and a mortgage, it's not as attractive to go back to school and take on that extra financial burden, right? Versus, okay, I'm 25, my girlfriend, my fiance will understand, and I'll just, I'll suck it up for another 2 years, but those extra 2 or 3 years will give you 40 years that you wouldn't have had before. So
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I know my kids I have 3 kids and they want a dog, and I'm like, "Oh, how is that gonna impact my life now, right?
Okay.
Having a dog," right? So,
4 kids. That's your 4th kid.
I know. I don't wanna do that. So going through all the stuff that we talked about, how do you structure education, professional development for some of the people that work for you now? Because obviously you have this bird's eye view, this you can go back into your time machine and go, okay, this is what worked for me, and I'm sure you have some thoughts on how you would
Yeah,
structure
I have
education in
I
your
have
company.
great support. I have great support, and I have great people who work with me. And so what we've done is, we've established a curriculum that we want our people to go through. And then we also have a residency program, which is approved by the American Physical Therapy Association. So we have a residency program as another outcome, just like as another venue, I should say, just like a doctor goes through a residency, physician. And then we do outcome studies, right? So we actually track all our therapists and we look at how they treat various diagnoses and various anatomical parts, right? Whether knees, shoulders, spine, whatever it may be. And we put everything together so that, let's just say, our elbow outcomes aren't great, or foot ankle outcomes aren't great, or a spine. Well, we have to look back at our educational process and saying, as a checks and balances, maybe what we think we're teaching, we think it's great. Maybe it's not that great because for some reason these outcomes aren't doing very well. And then when the educational system is what we think it is, the outcomes are at the scores that we want them to be at, which are exceptional, right? And so it's a checks and balances. It's not just saying we have a great education system and it's biased to our opinion. The outcomes we run is from an outside entity. We have nothing to do with the scores. They score them, they just provide us the information. So we have no effect on that with except, the way we actually treat our patients. Then every Tuesday night, we have someone, we have an, just for the audience to know, we have 185 facilities in 5 states. We have about 2,000 employees. We're probably a little less now because of the pandemic. We had about 700 clinicians. Now we're probably around 500 or so. But every Tuesday night, we have over 150 clinicians with advanced certifications. So somebody does a lecture for us. It's optional, right? But every Tuesday night, um, clinicians does a lecture for us. Another night of the week, we have a different physician do a lecture for us. We have a Q&A situation where we're called the Clinical Excellence Department. And so we have a question and answer, direct email to anybody who's in the Clinical Excellence Department. So any question is picked up and answered by a member of that department. We have a mentorship program where our facilities, if the clinical director has a young therapist or a therapist, regardless of their experience, struggling with a certain diagnosis, they're not good at knees, then one of our mentors goes there and spends 12 weeks with them, specifically focusing on knees. And so so obviously you can see that we're very serious about academics and education, right? And we still don't have it down. There's still so much more we want to do. But my point is, that has been a process that will continue to be a process. And I don't know many other companies or institutions that are doing what we're doing. And that's why we think we're getting better and better outcomes with regards to our patient care, because what we're doing on the back end is what's occurring on the front end. Same thing as I said before, early in my career, I really believe what I did on the back end really assisted me in my front end, so to speak. So
And I'm sure that helps with, employee retention and satisfaction and
yeah.
all this time you're putting in. And I assume it hasn't really changed much during COVID. If anything, you probably do a lot more distance-based education. And
Yeah, we do. We do a lot of Zoom, and I'll tell you this: because of COVID, a lot of schools, some practices unfortunately haven't made it, and some, have just, been in a position of, how do I say it? They're not growing. Like us, we're not where we were, but we're okay. We're stable. We're not going to go out of business, but we're gradually, like everybody else, progressing along to get to not only where we were before the pandemic, but to surpass that. And so, like, we have a student program as well. So we have over 125 schools, and we take over 300 students a year in physical therapy, athletic training, and very few, but from time to time, strength and conditioning, because we have a performance center where we train athletes as well. And, so in all aspects of education, we're trying, we're trying.
And those students, I assume I think you were telling me before, it's kind of it's a bit of an introduction and a bit of a job interview for you guys. You're like, hey,
Sure.
that person was really good. Like there's a
Absolutely. If you
benefit to having that.
give someone 6, 8, 12 weeks, that's a hell of a lot better job interview one on one, right? Versus someone sitting across the desk for an hour. So, as we go through this, we know where our needs are. We have anticipation where our needs are. And then hopefully, at least with the new graduates, we're hoping to get the cream of the crop, because as they're with us, we're trying to leave an impression where they want to work for us. And let's say we take, if we have 30 openings, well, we see 300 students a year, top 10% is 30 students. Hopefully we can get the top 10% of everybody that's gone through our program, in 2020, then 2021, et cetera. So we try to leave the impression with the opportunities we have as a company and the educational process. And if you survey most any profession, generally salary isn't number one with regards to their desire of wanting a job. It's education and career opportunity, followed by their salary and everything else and benefits, et cetera. Which I think we have a good package there as well. But yeah, so I think education is paramount. Based on my background and my history, and which was really left a strong impression during my years at special surgery.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that picking the right school isn't important, but you said you have affiliations with what 150 different schools that feed into your student program, and it
Almost. Well,
yeah.
between 125 and 150. Yeah.
Yeah, so I get the question a lot, like, what's the best school to go for physical therapy? And I assume that you have some in mind. You don't have to mention them, but certainly it's not necessarily where you go to school. It's what you do with
Yeah,
that education.
I think if you have a choice, you're fortunate. It is difficult to get into schools nowadays, like med school, PA school, PT school, etc. If you have a choice, then great. If you don't have a choice, you get into a school, go. Do the best you can. If you have a choice, let's just say your interest is in orthopedics and sports medicine, right? Well, is a school if you have a choice of two schools, does one have more of a focus in orthopedics and sports medicine? Maybe the other school has more of a focus on neurology. That's what they're known for, though everybody covers everything. And you go to the school that has that has best emphasis of what you want to practice, which also could change, right? As you go through programs, you may think I'm going to be the sports medicine physical therapist and wind up in pediatrics because you had experiences in pediatrics that you never dreamed you would have had, right? Just like I never thought I'd be the head strength coach at St. John's University or a CEO. And so things happen. That's what I mean. And I'll say it this way: at special surgery, there's residency and they have a fellowship program. And we also have a fellowship program with regards to a relationship with Boston University as well. So we have a residency and a fellowship program, and or a relationship with a fellowship program. And there was a fellow at the hospital for special surgery. His name was Claude T. Mormon, and we just called him T. Mormon. He's one of my favorite fellows, and one of my favorite orthopedic surgeons, very well renowned, out of North Carolina. And I asked him once, I said, what makes a great surgeon? And he went through how you have to go in the OR and a lot of work and everything else. But the other thing he said is you have to get a callus on your butt in the library. You got to study. You need to know, the research, the education, everything else. And that stayed with me, and something Coach Carnesecca said to me once, as I said, you always get these lessons, etc. I asked him once on the court, we were just practicing and we had a timeout. And I said, hey, coach, I'm just thinking, what's more important to winning the game, the players or the coaches? And I know it's the players, right? Because you got to have the talent to win. And I knew he knew too, but he didn't give me that answer. He paused a second and he said, 30% coaching, 60% players, and 10% luck. But you make your own luck. And that's my advice when you say, like, the young kids, like, hustle, work hard, all the things we've talked about, that's making your own luck. The effort is making your own luck. You spent 10 years with Charlie Francis. Look where you are now. And I'm not taking anything away from your talent and what you would have been without Charlie. All I'm saying is think about what a decade is. That's a long time. You spent 10 years with Charlie. It's paid off for you, right? Especially now, right? But I don't know if you thought what's going on now was going to occur when you were with Charlie. You know what I mean? And that's my point with this. And Charlie's best of all time, so, worked out for you pretty good. So, yeah, it's just, but you made the effort.
Yeah.
10 years, 10 years. That's a long time. 10 years at St. John's. That's a long time, so got to make the effort.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of sum up the takeaways I hear are you're making that effort, you're putting in the time, and you're busting your butt, and you're trying to get as, to some degree, as diverse an exposure to different people and things as possible. And then that will help you to make your decisions moving forward. It's not as simple as like things will just fall in your lap. You do have to hustle.
Yeah, and for those, I know it happens because I've had the conversations. I'm trying. I just can't catch a break, right? I just can't. Whatever. All I could tell you is this: is that when it's time to give up, you'll know it. And if you really believe in it, and you really love it, I would keep pursuing it because when you give up, you'll never know how close you were. You might just be there, in a week. That opportunity might have happened a week later, but you gave up. And so, if it's something that you really want to do and you really have a passion for, I would do everything possible, every venue, any, call somebody you don't even know. There are people out there that'll help you. Email them, call them, and there are people who give you advice, and you just never know. And but if you really want to do something, don't give up. I would say that it eventually it can come. It's just like I said, everybody pays a price. There are people who hit triples, and there are people who were born on third base that think they hit a triple, right? And you know, I'm sorry. Sometimes you just have to hit a triple, and sometimes you just have to wait for that pitch. You know,
Yeah, and I know you're not a social media animal, but people
not
can find out more about professional PT at professionalpt.com, and and they can find a way to get in touch with you as well. Are there any other areas that they should look?
Yeah, I mean, they could, look at, like the CSCCA, the NSCA, any organizations with regards to strength and conditioning, the APTA for physical therapy, the NATA for athletic training, if you want to pursue and investigate careers, look in your community, speak to therapists in your community, volunteer, see if you like it, try to find a college with a strength coach, volunteer if you're interested in that, and actually stand there and see what they go through and see if it, if you develop a taste for it, or if you say it's not what I thought it would be. And I'm glad I did this, so I didn't waste any more time. But again, right, it comes down to making the efforts. So,
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Rob, and
thanks for having me, Derek. Don't know if I helped you with anything, but I appreciate you having me.
I'll continue to tap into your wisdom and your expertise, and hopefully we can meet in person soon and continue this.
No, well, I'll be doing the same. I'm sure. Have for years, and we'll continue to. You're not getting away that easy. So I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a good one.